A reading of the first chapter from the Church of the Devil, entitled A Marvelous Idea. An old Benedictine manuscript says that the devil one day had the idea to found a church. Even though his profits were well established and large, he felt humiliated by the marginalized role he had played for centuries, without organization, without discipline, without rules, without rituals, without anything. He lived, so to say, on the divine leftovers, on human carelessness and servility. Nothing fixed, nothing regular. Why on earth wouldn't he have a church of his own? A church of the devil would be the efficient way to do battle with the other religions and destroy them once and for all.
"Let's have it, then. A church," he concluded. "Scripture versus scripture, breviary versus breviary. It will have my Mass with wine and bread in abundance, teachings, decrees, devotional periods, and all the other ecclesiastical gadgetry. My creed will be the universal nucleus of all spirituality. My church a tent of Abraham, and then, while the other religions fight within themselves and split apart, my church will be unified. I'll never have to face a Muhammad or a Luther. There are so many paths to the affirmative. To the negative there is only one."
Saying this, the devil tossed back his head and threw out his arms in a gesture of magnificence and virility. He then came up with the idea to go tell God, to throw down the gauntlet. He lifted up his eyes, aflame with hatred, embittered by vengeance, and said to himself,
"Let us go. The time is now."
And all at once, flapping his wings, and with such a din that it shook all the regions of the abyss, he uprooted from the darkness and ascended into the infinite blue. A reading of the second chapter from the Church of the Devil, entitled Between God and the Devil. God was welcoming home an old man when the devil arrived in heaven. The seraphim who were garlanding the newcomer detained the devil right away, and he waited at the entrance with his eyes directed at the Lord.
"What do you want from me?"
said the Almighty.
"I don't come on behalf of your servant Faust, but for all the Fausts across the centuries."
"Explain."
"Lord, the explanation is easy, but I tell you what. First, receive this old gentleman, give him the best place in heaven, order the finest zithers and lutes, and receive him with the most divine choruses."
"Do you have any idea what he did?"
questioned the Lord with eyes full of sweetness.
"No, but he's probably among the last who'll come to check in here. It won't be long now before heaven begins to look like an empty house, because you've priced yourself out of the market. It's too costly. I am building a kind of discount resort, more within reach. In 2 words, I'm founding a church. I'm tired of the disorganization of my casual and circumstantial reign. The time has come to seize the final and complete victory. And so, this is what I've come to tell you in all loyalty, so you don't accuse me of being sneaky. Seems like a good idea, don't you think?"
"You came to say this, not to legitimize it."
"Right you are. But self-love delights in hearing the applause of its masters. Truth is, in this case, it would be the applause of a defeated master, and such a demanding one. Lord, I'm going back to earth now, and I'll be laying my foundation stone."
"Go."
"Would you like me to come back and announce when the work's complete?"
"That's not necessary.
Suppose you just tell me straight away for what reason, being so tired of disorganization, you thought only now to found a church." The devil smiled with an air of scorn and triumph. He had some cruel idea in his spirit, some spicy retort ready there in the saddlebag of his memory. But something in this brief moment of eternity made him feel superior to God himself, and he held back his laughter, saying,
"It's only now I've concluded my analysis begun some centuries ago, and that is, that the virtues, those offspring of heaven, are in great number a bit like queens, whose velvet capes are edged with fringes of cotton, and so I plan to pull them by their cotton fringe, bringing them all into my church, and then behind them will follow the finery of the silk.
You old bullshit artist.
Now, just listen. Many bodies who kneel at your feet in your temples of the world, dress up in their hoops, coming from living rooms and streets, blush up their faces with the same powder, scent their handkerchiefs with the same fragrance, their eyes all sparkly with curiosity and devotion, divided between the holy book and the whiskers of sin. Look at the ardor, the indifference at least, with which this gentleman spoke in public about the good works he spreads around so liberally, be it with clothes or boots or spare change or whatever necessities of life it might be. And I don't want it to seem that I'm hung up on details. I'm not talking, for example, about the serenity with which this judge of brotherly love in processions piously carries your love and seal of approval in his heart. I'm moving on up to big business.
At this the seraphim flapped their drowsy wings, heavy with boredom. Michael and Gabriel stared at the Lord, imploring. God interrupted the devil.
You're vulgar, which is the worst thing that can happen to a spirit of your species. Everything you say or might say is said again and again by the moralists of the world. The subject is worn out. And if you have neither the force nor the originality to reprise a spent subject, it's better for you just to stay quiet and go back where you came from. Take a look. All my legions show on their face the symptoms of an infectious boredom that you've blighted them with. Even the old gentleman here looks nauseated. And do you even know what he did?
I already told you, no.
After an honest life, he had a sublime death. Surviving a shipwreck, he was ready to save himself on a floating board. But he saw a pair of newlyweds in the flower of life, fighting against death. He gave them his board, and then he sank into eternity. Nothing in the public eye, only the sea and the sky above. Where do you find your cotton fringe now?
Lord, I am, as you well know, the spirit of negativity.
Are you negating this death?
I negate everything. Misanthropy can take the appearance of charity. Letting others have life, to a misanthrope, is to spite them.
How glib you are, and subtle. Go on, go, found your church, summon the virtuous. Gather up your fringe, convene all mankind, but go, go!
In vain the devil tried to elaborate just a bit more. God compelled him into silence. The seraphim, at a divine signal, filled the heavens with the harmonies of Hallelujah in Excelsis. The devil suddenly felt himself in mid-air. He folded up his wings and like a bolt of lightning plummeted back to the earth. A reading of the 3rd chapter from The Church of the Devil, entitled The Gospel to Mankind. As soon as his feet were back on the ground, the devil didn't lose a minute. He quickly donned the Benedictine vestments, and once in a habit of good reputation, he began to spread a new and extraordinary doctrine. With a voice that growled over and over again inside the belly of the age, he promised to his disciples and congregants the delights of the land, everything glorious, and the most intimate of pleasures. He confessed he was the devil, but he confessed in order to rectify the idea that people had had of him, and to refute the stories that the pious told about him.
It's true, I'm the devil, but not the devil of sulphurous nights, of bedtime stories, the terror of children, but the devil, true and unique, the very genius in nature, to whom was given that name, to expunge it from the hearts of people. See me as kind and gentle. I am your true father. Come then, take up that name, invented to shame me, and make a trophy of it, a banner,
a T-shirt.
And I will give you everything, and more, and more, and more, and then some more. This was the way he spoke. At first, to stir up enthusiasm, to wake up the indifferent, to assemble the multitudes at his feet, in short. And they came. And as soon as they came, he moved forward to define his doctrine. It could be said his doctrine was a spirit of negation. This amounts to the substance of it, because as to the form it took, it was sometimes subtle. Other times it was cynical and shameless. He claimed that the accepted virtues should be substituted with others that were the natural and legitimate ones. Pride, lust, sloth were rehabilitated, and so too was greed, which he declared was nothing more than the mother of economy, the difference being that the mother was robust and the daughter was sinewy. As to anger, its best offense was in the existence of Homer. For without the fury of Achilles, we wouldn't have the Iliad. Sing Muse the rage of Peleus' son, Achilles. He said the same about gluttony, which produced the best pages in Rabelais, and many good verses of Aesop. Yes, a virtue so superior that no one recalls the battles of Lucullus, but they do his feasts of luxury. It was gluttony that made him immortal. But even putting aside these reasons from the subjects of literature and history, and just to show the intrinsic value of this virtue, who could ever deny that the sensation of good food in the mouth and the stomach, supersized, is better than measly scraps, or the saliva of fasting? And so, to hold up his end, the devil promised to substitute in the place of the Lord's vineyard, a metaphorical expression, a vineyard of the devil, an expression literal and true, and this one would never be lacking in fruit, and from the very best strains in the world. As to envy, he preached with cold assurance that it was the primary virtue, the origin of infinite prosperity, a precious virtue, which came to supply all the others, as well as talent itself. The multitude chased after him with enthusiasm. The devil inculcated with grand coups of eloquence the entire new order of things, changing their perceptions, making them to love the perverse and to detest the sane. There was nothing more curious, for example, than the definition he gave for fraud. He called it the left arm of mankind, the right arm being force, he concluded. Many men are just left-handed, that's all. Now, understand, he didn't demand that everyone be left-handed. It was not exclusive. Let some be left-handed, let others be right-handed. He accepted everyone except whoever was neither forceful nor fraudulent. And yet the more rigorous and profound case that he made was for that of taking bribes. A casuist of the time came to admit that the case he made was a monument to logic. Venality, said the devil, was the exercise of a right superior to all other rights. If you can sell your house, your ox, your shoe, your hat, things that are yours for legal and lawful reasons, but which, in every case, are things outside of you, how come you can't sell out your opinion, your vote, your word, your faith? Things that are more than yours, because they are your very conscience, that is to say, yourself. To deny this is to fall into the absurd and into contradiction. For aren't there women who sell their hair? Can't a man sell some of his blood for transfusion into another anemic man? And blood and hair being parts of the body, shall they enjoy a privilege that is denied to character, denied to the moral makeup of people? Demonstrating the principle in this way, the devil wasted no time in showcasing the systemic advantage of the worldly and commercial order. He went on to show, with respect to social prejudice, it would be advisable to hide the exercise of a legitimate right like this, because it would exercise venality and hypocrisy at the same time, that is to say, to merit its doubling. And he went up and down, examining everything, putting everything to rights. Certainly he spoke out against the forgiveness of sins and other maxims of leniency and kindness.
He didn't formally prohibit baseless slander, but stimulated the exercise of it by way of exacting a return in money or some other form. In those cases, however, if it were simply a provoked outburst of the imagination and nothing more, he prohibited the receipt of payment, because that should qualify as sweat equity. He condemned all forms of respect as the possible elements of a kind of social and personal decorum, unless, of course, there were a personal advantage involved. But this exception was soon eliminated in consideration of the fact that self-interest always turned respect into common flattery, and then this, sentimentality, became the primary intention and not the self-interest. So, to complete his masterwork, the devil understood that he must break up all human solidarity. Indeed, the practice of loving one's neighbor was a grave obstacle to his new institution. He showed that this rule was a simple invention of parasites and insolvent business owners. One should offer only indifference to one's neighbor, or in some cases hate or contempt. He even came to demonstrate that one's fellow man was a fallacy, and cited the following phrase of a Neapolitan priest, that fine and literate Galliani, who wrote to one of the Marcheses of the ancient regime, "Enough of this fellow man. There is no fellow man." The single hypothesis he did allow for in loving one's neighbor was when it came to loving other men's wives, because this type of love had the peculiarity of being nothing more than an individual's love for himself. Now, when some disciples decided that because of the metaphysics involved, his explanation was beyond the masses' ability to understand, the devil resorted to this justification. 100 people have shares in a bank for transactions they share in common, but each shareholder doesn't really care what those are, as long as he gets his own dividends. This is what happens among adulterers. And this apologia was included in his book of the Holy Testament. A reading of the fourth and final chapter from The Church of the Devil, entitled Fringes and Fringes. The devil's prediction was right. The virtues whose velvet cape was edged with cotton fringe, once pulled by that fringe, dropped the cape into the nettles, and they came over to enlist in the new church. The others followed behind, and time blessed the institution. The church was established. The doctrine was propagated, and not a region of the globe was unaware of it. There was not a language it wasn't translated into, not a race that didn't love it. The devil raised a shout of triumph. One day, however, many years later, the devil noticed that many of his faithful, on the sly, were practicing the old virtues. They didn't practice all of them, nor completely, but some partially, and as I say, on the sly. Certain gluttons went on retreat to eat economically 3 or 4 times a year, precisely on the days according to Catholic precepts. Many of the avaricious gave alms at night or on the more sparsely peopled streets. A few of those who skimmed from the cash drawers put small quantities back. The fraudulent spoke from time to time with their hearts on their sleeves, but with their usual face of concealment to make believe they were deceiving others. This discovery really stuck in the devil's craw. He set about to acquaint himself more directly with this outbreak. Some cases were almost incomprehensible, like the Levantine drug dealer, who relentlessly poisoned an entire generation, and, with the proceeds he earned, he rescued the children of his victims. In Cairo he discovered a consummate camel thief who covered up his features in order to go to mosque. The devil confronted him at the entrance to one and made the accusation to his face. He denied it, saying he went there to steal the camel of an interpreter. He stole it, sure enough, in plain sight of the devil, but then went to give it as a gift to a muezzin who prayed for him to Allah. The Benedictine manuscript cites many other extraordinary discoveries. Among them is the fact that all of this completely disoriented the devil. One of his best apostles was a Calabrian, a man of 50, a renowned forger of documents who owned a beautiful house in the Roman countryside with paintings, statues, a library, etc. He was a born fraud. He even took to staying in bed so he didn't have to admit he was healthy. This man not only didn't cheat when he gambled, he gave bonuses to his servants. Having won over the friendship of a canon priest, he went every week to make his confession with him in an isolated chapel, and even though he didn't reveal any of his secret activities, he crossed himself twice, once when he kneeled and as he stood back up. The devil could hardly believe such treachery. Now there was no doubt the problem was real. He didn't stop for one instant. The amazement of it didn't give him time to reflect, to compare, or to draw a conclusion about the present spectacle from some analog in the past. He flew straight to heaven once again, trembling with rage, desperate to know the occulted cause of such a perverted phenomenon. God listened to him with infinite patience, didn't interrupt him, didn't reprimand him, nor show the slightest triumph over his satanic agony. Finally, the weight of the almighty gaze fell heavily upon him, and the Lord said, "What is it you want, my poor devil? All the cotton capes now have silken fringes, just as the velvet capes were once fringed in cotton. What are you going to do? That's the never-ending contradiction of humanity." The Church of the Devil by Machado de Assis, first published in 1884, translated from Portuguese, edited and adapted for audio performance by Todd Conner, copyright 2020. If you like this work and would like to support The Carryorker, please consider making a purchase at the Carryorker Podcast Store. A direct link is available on the website at www.thecarryorker.com. Or if you'd like to make a donation, click on the website's link for PayPal. Commercial or private sponsorship of future episodes can include the recording of a story live at your own location. See the website for details. In the meantime, as always, listen, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.